Hello and welcome to another art journal with Iris. This is a full-length version in which I am just kind of chatting to you, talking about my process, kind of letting you in on all the kind of the supplies and the techniques and the thinking behind how I create an art journal or junk journal spread. I'm working in my junk journal, and here I am coming in with some wall paint that a friend of mine gave me after she was done with it. I love working with something like this, both from the point of view of like, I love that my friend gave it to me and then I think of her when I am using it. I love the fact that I'm reusing something that otherwise would have just kind of like gone and sat in a shed somewhere. And I love it practically because it's a really nice kind of matte paint, kind of like craft paint, and I got loads of it, so I don't have to worry about using it up or wasting it or anything like that. Here I'm coming in with some Liquitex heavy body acrylic, again adding to this first layer. The first layer is not important. It is just about building up kind of interest, getting rid of the blank page, creating different textures. So I came in with a palette knife at first and then with the brayer, and it just adds different textures that are going to shine through later on. Here I am using Liquitex acrylic ink, and I'm applying it with a brayer, which gives a really nice kind of blotchy, splotchy texture that I really like. This is some fluorescent pink, heavy body acrylic. I go through phases of using different things, and I went through a big phase of fluorescent a couple of years ago, and then it hasn't shown up in my work very much since, and now in these last few weeks I am really into it again. So that's why you see me using this. I am using a key card, old debit card, to apply this, to kind of apply lines and kind of scrape across the page, things like that. Here I'm coming in with watercolor. I love watercolor as kind of like an intermediary layer because it dries much less bold than it looks when you're first applying it. So it looks really dark right now, but it's going to dry and then it's going to become this really nice kind of almost magical layer in between. And again, I'm just grabbing for different supplies, different techniques, different applications of these supplies and the different colors, just to get rid of the blank page, get my hand moving, kind of loosening up, getting into that zone of not thinking too much and just doing, just creating. This is some white gesso, and way too much came out of the bottle, to kind of tone things down, and to have a little to not have all the page be so in your face. So I'm kind of pushing things into the background so that I then have a really nice layer to work on again. And I kind of feel like nothing is ever lost. So you're applying layer over layer over layer, and even if you do cover some stuff up, all the layers underneath still inform the additional layers that come on top. Here I'm just wiping off the excess rather than just like getting rid of it. I'm just using it, putting it into another journal so that it doesn't go to waste, which, you know, always a good thing. And I think, again, it's about this feeling of like, you know, you just go with it. Like nothing is a mistake, nothing is bad, even though in the moment you might think like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. But it's kind of like moving with it rather than against it. These are some Conte crayons. Conte? I don't know. They're kind of like, they're quite chalky. And I'm just adding a little bit of texture. Not really thinking too much about it. Not going for anything specific. Just adding a little bit of color and texture and playfulness. Here I'm coming back with that fluorescent pink. Gotta love a bit of fluorescent pink. And as you see, I don't apply it all over. I kind of pick one area and then I will stick to that area, because otherwise what would happen is you get this whole homogeneous kind of where the whole page looks the same, and that wouldn't be very interesting. So I kind of work in different little sections at a time. So now I'm coming in with a kind of a contrasting color. So this, you've seen me use, red and pink, and now I'm coming in with a dark blue, and I'm adding a little bit of water to it as I go, and just kind of adding lines, kind of outlining the page a little bit. So these are all kind of techniques that I draw on without really having a specific goal in mind in that moment. But they're all kind of techniques in my repertoire that I then draw on kind of intuitively. So I always think that it's important to understand that intuition is just kind of like letting things come up that you already know. So it's kind of old knowledge. Here I am coming in with a charcoal pencil to draw a really kind of loose intuitive face. I'm using very kind of like rough guidelines. The eyes go in the middle with about the space for a third eye in the middle. The nose becomes a circle under that, and then the mouth comes under that. It's all very kind of rough and loose, and there isn't really a lot of attention to perfection or symmetry or things like that, just very rough, because I want to really stay free and have suggestions of faces and features more than a pristine, perfect representation, because that just that really fits my style and my sensibilities. Like I can't be bothered with perfection because it frustrates me, and it doesn't make me happy. So that's why I'm coming in here with this catalyst wedge, which is kind of like a silicone tool, and I smudge out all of the charcoal to deliberately kind of make it more vague and more imperfect. And this was kind of an intuitive choice. I still had some of that blue paint left over, and I thought, okay, I will come into the shading areas, like the darker areas, kind of around the edges and around the features, and I will put in this blue, knowing full well that I'm gonna come back over it later with different supplies, so that it becomes more kind of quote unquote realistic. But I just really like being able to make these really bold decisions, because they always pay off in the end. It's scary in the moment, but it always pays off. Here I'm coming in with a palette knife and just white acrylic paint, and I'm very, very roughly putting in white where kind of highlights go, but it's a pretty imprecise tool, especially at this size. So I kind of really go over the lines that I've created before. And yes, this is kind of worrying and scary in the moment. But it really kind of goes, it's bold decisions that you then know you can come back and firm up and get those details back. So that's what I'm doing here. Here I'm coming back with my charcoal pencil, and you will see me doing this every few minutes. You will see me coming back with this pencil and putting those lines back in again. And what happens is that if you keep going boldly over all of those over all of the things that you've done before and kind of covering them up and then bringing them back and covering them up and bringing them back, you get such a rich and like depth, like kind of structured layering of the face, and it's much more interesting than if you just did one layer and then said it was done. So I really love doing this. So I'm coming in with some felt tip pens, like some acrylic markers, and this is like a watercolor marker, and just kind of going over the shading or going over the lines. It's a fairly kind of intuitive process. This is a Molotov paint pen, and it's red, and I love kind of accenting things like the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and then sometimes the cheeks and stuff. I like accenting these things in red because it's quite shocking, it's quite stark, it's quite raw. I really love that look. Here I love going in with a black ballpoint. It just gives this really nice kind of scratchy raw look. And here I'm coming in with a blue Prismacolor pencil, which again I kind of just like go scratchy all over it, and it gives a really nice like raw and unfinished and almost like playful and raw look. Here I am coming in with my kind of purple watercolor, and here I'm adding some dark blue as well. If you're familiar with my work, you will know that most of the faces that I do, they have purple hair for some reason. I think I was inspired by Egon Schiele at some point in the past, and then like kind of always kept coming back to this this purple hair. And as you can see, I'm not really creating a hair like a hairline outside of the hair. So it's not like you don't really know where the hair ends. You just know that it starts somewhere on the side of the face, and then it kind of fans out and merges into the background. Here I am using a applicator bottle with black paint, black fluid acrylic paint, and just adding black to the eyes and creating scribbly lines on the line work to just kind of create a more raw and playful look again. Here I'm coming back in with some highlights that got lost before. So I might go in with a very kind of rough look at first with like a palette knife, and then as the layers build up and I get more towards the kind of the ending, the finished product, I will come in with more slightly more precise tools or media. But here you see I am kind of smushing it out again to not make things too perfect and to really build up those layers again. The only thing I regret slightly is that the black paint from the applicator bottle wasn't quite dry, so there's like a black smudge on her cheek, which I didn't really intend to, but in the end it's not something I'm then going to get rid of. I'll just leave it there. Here you see me coming back again with that charcoal pencil. It is never far away. I kind of keep coming back with the same techniques over and over. And like I said, so instead of applying one technique once, I will apply that technique 4, 5, 6 times and then go to another technique. And so I keep going back and forth between the different techniques and doing the same thing, so that in the end it becomes such a rich kind of tapestry, and you can't really you just see this delicious kind of complex complex journal page without really understanding like what came first and what came second. I really kind of I love that kind of, it's raw and slightly mysterious, lots of scratching, lots of little applications. Here I'm just doing a little application of watercolor, and then I am drying it afterwards and then coming in with another technique before I kind of go back to maybe that technique or something else. And that's really important to note actually as well, that between every layer, I tend to dry my work really thoroughly. Obviously, I've cut all of the drying out of the video because it would be really boring to watch me drying it, but it's a good quarter or third of the time that I am sitting there working on my piece, I am using my heat tool to dry things, or letting things dry really thoroughly, and it allows the colors to stay really vibrant and for the layers to kind of stay unique and not to kind of all get mushed into each other. So that's a real big kind of secret to how I work. It's drying things, and it's having a lot of patience while things dry. And also I use that time whilst I am using my heat tool. I use that time to kind of just be there with myself and my thoughts and my art piece, and kind of I don't know, like just have an experience of myself and think of what I might want to do next. And those thoughts then just come to me. So it doesn't become a very kind of fraught process of like, oh, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? It's kind of like there's time in the process to think about that. I have all my supplies that I use a lot kind of within arm's reach on my desk right in front of me. So all these things that I use a lot, I can just grab intuitively and not have to kind of like go into a cupboard to find it or whatever. This is a very sharp hard pencil, like an H pencil, that I use to kind of scratch and add lines. I love it. There I was adding a little bit of highlights to the eyes with a pen, like a gel pen. And then coming in with that red pencil and adding some more red. Here I decided that I wanted a contrasting color. So I used a lot of cold colors. I mean, this is probably still like a cold green, but everything was very kind of purpley pink red. And this is actually going to the complete other side of the color wheel then, going to a kind of a green, grassy, yellow. And I think you'll agree that it adds a real kind of contrast in terms of color to what was there before. It really pops next to the kind of the purple and the red and stuff. So I really kind of, it was an intuitive decision, but it's kind of like based on actual color theory. I'm adding a little bit of that color into the other bits of the painting just to kind of balance it out, but I do think I dab it away a little bit again with a paper towel. There I go, so that it's not too obvious, but it just kind of it really helps if you do something in one place in your painting that you do a little bit of it in another place as well. Here I'm going in with that nice thick brush and doing a cross with Black India ink. And again, that's just something that in the moment I feel like I want to do. The idea just comes to me, and you have to learn. If you're a very intuitive person, then it might come naturally, but if you're not, you might have to learn to listen to yourself and to listen to those kind of like what if moments, the moment where you go like, oh, what if I use that color, or what if I want to write something, or you might have some words kind of going around in your head and you might write them down, things like that. And here I am just using my dip pen and India ink to write along that cross, and I'm writing some thoughts. I usually use these opportunities for kind of like automatic writing, not really thinking too much about it, writing illegibly. As soon as I've written it down, I don't really necessarily remember what I wrote, and nobody will be able to read it. I can't read it anymore either. And it's one of my favorite ways of really putting something of myself in that moment, the me that I am in that moment, and putting that into the art journal page, because that's the whole point for me about art journaling. It's about expressing something about me in the moment, even if it's subconscious. Even I'm not sitting down saying like, oh, I am expressing this and that. It's just that's just what happens. Honestly, it's so quick. Before I know it, I am done. It's a really quick process of just kind of like expressing myself. So I really hope you enjoyed this second episode. If you liked the video and want to see more, please give the video a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one.